Well, good morning. My name is Jared Malott here with episode 4 of the Coltist, an Indianapolis Colts podcast, life podcast, football podcast, NFL, college football, kind of whatever we feel like talking about, really. But here we are. So, Colts are now 0 and 3. Lost their two first games at home to who I presume will be either a division winner and obviously one of the top four seeds in the NFC going to the playoffs. And I'm also going to take a stab at possibly a wild card in Seattle, who again could hit or miss there. And that's primarily because Seattle's defense is so horrible bad, which again raises a lot of questions about what's going on in the Colts with the Colts. If you are familiar with my work, a few years ago, I got to interview Eric Ebron. And what I came away from that with was a quote that I've since heard several times: the best ability is availability. And while I understand the merit of being capable of playing today, there are obviously a million questions that come up when it feels like, and again, I'm kind of pointing this out a couple episodes early on in this podcast where I'm saying we're playing against healthy teams and we're really banged up, and it really makes me wonder. Again, a million questions. Like, do guys just not want to play uh, for the Colts? Is it the coaches? Is it the town? Is it, you know what I mean? Um, I get it. Um, I could absolutely understand how someone would find it absolutely insufferable to be a professional athlete in Indianapolis. The way people talk about Carson Wentz and Jacoby Brissette, quarterbacks have the toughest job on the field, get the least amount of respect. You know, the big knock on the Colts this week is that if you lose to the Dolphins with Jacoby Brissett as a quarterback, when he had like 89 yards passing last week, would just be a you know a boon upon your season, kind of no matter how it turns out. There's a lot of people saying, oh, first 5 games of the year rough for the Colts. The last, they ought to win the last 10 or 12. And before the season started, I was one of those people. Stephen Reed and I sat down and recorded our one of our what ended up being one of the last episodes of Afternoon Pancakes, and talked about how you know the first 4 or 5 weeks are very difficult games to try to compartmentalize, break the season down into quarters like kind of been doing. And we decided that we broke it down the first 5 weeks and then the remaining 4 weeks blocks, 12 games, will make up the season. And we talked about how it's very possible to go 0 and 5 and still make the playoffs. Now, when you say something like that and you've recorded it and put it on the internet, it's a little difficult to walk back your expectations for your franchise. But I'm really more interested in figuring out what the hell are the Colts doing with Carson Wentz. More specifically, after I've had time to sort of digest the game on Sunday, I have to wonder why was Carson Wentz playing? And I understand Jacob Eason not ready for an NFL start, and Brett Hundley hadn't been part of the program long enough to play him, and Ellinger hadn't been back to practice. But I can promise you the next time Carson Wentz goes down, if Ellinger is healthy enough to play, he'll play, and I expect him to fit into the program very easily and surprise some people because if you remember back to any of the content you've seen me create before, I'm real big on data. And I've been saying this for a while, and obviously now I kind of got my wife on board. We're starting to work out. I want to go back to school, be a part of a football program, uh, get a degree in data science, or get a master's degree in data science. I'm thinking Ball State, Butler, Purdue, wherever I can kind of get in where you fit in, right? But with the idea being of bringing that to an NFL franchise from more of a football perspective rather than just a data analysis. One of the data points that stuck out to me was that 70, something like 70% of passes made by NFL quarterbacks are out of the pocket, outside of the pocket. And with that knowledge, uh, and sort of seeing how the Colts had struggled after Peyton Manning and after Andrew Luck. And when I look at guys like Jacoby Brissette, I actually still love Jacoby Brissette. Felt like his game, he's like one of those players that came into the NFL 20 years too late. He's sort of a bigger, slower guy, but wants to run with the ball. Probably would have been great in the 80s and 90s. A step too slow at this level to get out of the pocket due to the speed of the pass rushers in the NFL. And that's where we're at. And when we look at dominant pass rushers in the NFL, they're running low 4.6, high 4.5 40s. They're very long and athletic, and they're beating beating the tackles. So one of the problems in the NFL right now, and in football right now, is that tackles can't guard pass rushers. You see it with the Colts. You see it with five or six quarterbacks going down every week, and that's because I hate to say stuff like this because it sounds like I'm being emotional about. It's true. Nobody wants to play offensive line. If you and people aren't gonna agree with this, but when I was growing up, like offensive and defensive line weren't sexy, right? Being a pass rusher is a sexy thing. Being a linebacker was sexy. Playing safety or cornerback, those things have appeal at the next level. But being a lineman, that was kind of one of the things. Linemen are always depressed, right? Because they're underrepresented, right? And the Colts are a shining example of the problems a team's going to have both sides of the ball when you've got multiple players that you need to be relying on injured, and that for the Colts right now is really all their best players, right? So we in no particular order, but we can try to do that, right? Quentin Nelson's injured, he's got an ankle injury, probably not playing this week. From there, Jonathan Taylor's got a knee, so there was your answer as why he only got 10 carries, even though he's an effective runner. He's dealing with a little bit of a knee. Marlon Mack wants traded because he's not getting play. First of all, understand like the Colts aren't going to be bad Italian talent evaluators, and there's probably a reason that he's not gotten out there on a field, and the fact that he wants a trade and wants out of the org, 3 games into the season, I put Marlon Mack in the same bucket that I would put somebody saying fire Frank Reich or get rid of Carson Wentz. Now, there is a group of people who I would absolutely fit within this group, and that is anybody that thinks that it's probably in Carson Wentz's best interest to not play football until the offensive line is healthy. And I would go so far as to say, you've got Braden Smith dinged up, Eric Fisher not at full speed. You know what I mean? Like you've got 60% of your offensive line is either dead or wounded, and then you've got Carson Wentz who sprained both ankles, who last week showed you. So if you'll take a mental trip with me, if you think about Peyton Manning being able to completely run an offense on his own, up and down the field, drive on people, score, make adjustments at the line, call audibles at the line, um, and not have to be mobile to do that. Showing you that football is a mental game. Andrew Luck sort of blending, sort of the Michael Vick, Lamar Jackson sort of mold, this hyper athletic, hyper cerebral, and sort of blending those things. That was Andrew Luck. And then, I've kind of said, with Carson Wentz, he has the capability to run an offense like Peyton Manning and have the athletic ability of like an Andrew Luck. But when you're hurting your lower extremities, you're taking away Carson Wentz's best asset, which is his ability to stretch a play and make a play with his feet, whether that's rushing the football or throwing the football on the run. Um, and I think the Colts are in a precarious spot here because here's the problem. Let's just say that that Carson Wentz guts this out, which I don't agree with. I absolutely would sit the guy. 60% of your O line's dinged up or coming back. I would wait until my O line was fully healthy, and I'd then put a well rested Carson Wentz behind my then healthy offensive line. But apparently that makes far too much sense. Um, so what is probably going to happen is like a Quentin Nelson doesn't play on Sunday. We talked about this Chris Reed, and he's a great backup guard, good for the Colts. But again, it's hard to kind of get excited, even when it's a beatable opponent. Um, and a lot of people are saying it's a must-win game. By that calculation, every game is a must-win game. But the reality is this: uh, this game against Miami is a conference game, which is just happens to be just a little less important than a division game, and is a little more important than like a non-division, non-conference game, right? So the thought process here is that I actually think the Colts will win because obviously last week was just a stinker. I'm expecting uh, either Carson Wentz is healthier and the other half of the offense gets used. But I want to make sure that I get it out. One of the things that people need to understand about what happens when you're mobile quarterback that you're using as a weapon with the ball in his hands, not just as a thrower of the ball or hander off of the football, um, and he gets hurt and you play him anyway, it takes away half of your offense. You can't run your true RPO anymore. It's either a handoff or you're throwing the snag. Uh, and you can't run any sort of your option looks, your veer looks, because defense is absolutely not biting on your quarterback as a ball carrier when he's hobbling around like he was. So that means that your play action game's garbage. Your drop back pass game gets bad because he can't move within the pocket to get the ball off. So he's one read quarterback. And a lot of people are going to point at Carson Wentz's struggles and blame it like on his mentality. And the reality is, in the NFL, if you can't hit your first read in under 3 seconds from the ball hitting your hands, you're going to either have to throw it away or get out of the pocket. And so, what I have noticed that Carson Wentz has done that I've been saying for years has to be able, you got to complete passes at a high percentage, but it almost has to be like if it isn't a completion, it's a throwaway. That's how good you have to be. Andrew Luck had stretches where he was literally either throwing a completion and throwing someone open, or he was intentionally throwing it out of bounds because the guy ran the wrong route, wasn't where you're supposed to be. Um, you need that level of execution. The thought process that I'd shared after the game was that I just got done coaching quarterbacks and being an offensive coordinator and being a play caller. It's clear to me that Carson Wentz is very familiar with this scheme, which this is a spread slash West Coast style offense, um, which just means that the difference between like a spread offense and a West Coast offense is the hybridization of the tight end. Um, So because because of the style of offense the Colts run, they want to run like the RPO, the play action, the rollout, the bootleg. They want to do those things because it wears out a defense and stunts your pass rush when your defensive linemen are tired from running all over the fucking field all game, right? So so when people are pointing at a guy staring down his one read, they're neglecting the fact that he knows he has no time to throw the ball. He's looking at the who should be the fucking open, right? And you get kind of let down when they're not, and you see him just throw the ball at someone's feet. That's actually a good thing because a lot of quarterbacks throw the ball into coverage and throw interceptions, and I see things out of Carson Wentz where I'm like, you know what, I can actually appreciate this. And I get it. It looks bleak. It's bad. So here's what I've been kind of hinting at. So I don't think Carson Wentz is bad. I actively think he's good. I think the offensive line's like dumb banged up. And then they used the high draft pick on Kwity Paye, and he's been banged up, and he's supposed to be bringing a pass rush. And for the record, when he was out there, he's effective, right? So the reality is, more so than just other teams, it appears, some other teams, there are other teams that have way bad injury problems, like the Ravens have bad injury problems. Um, when the Colts are healthy, they're going to be dangerous. And again, it doesn't appear to be because they're well coached or well managed. It's readily apparent to me that Chris Ballard is shrewd, uh, and that he's okay with the narrow margins of victory that they're able to get away with in a soft division. And I think until we as a fan base sort of realize that that's where we are, that we are sort of the victims of planned mediocrity. That means what we've planned for. We had a generational talent at quarterback retire at 30 that legitimately is smart enough to probably have played for another decade, but I think he kind of saw the writing on the wall, right? He saw, the Colts have Kelly at that point, Costanzo, right, towards the end of his career. Andrew Luck's probably gone on many like a fishing trip or a night out to dinner, and Anthony Costanzo had probably brought up to Andrew Luck that he didn't know how long I could do this. And when you think about the talent it takes at tackle, because it's one of the most important positions on the field. I had some players this past year getting into my ear asking me questions, and they asked me, what's the most important position on offense? Quarterback. What's the second most important position? Center. The quarterback and center exchange must be 100%, right? Think about what you're willing to watch as a fan of football. If the guy fumbles the snap, that shit doesn't happen, but like two or three times somebody's losing their job, right? So the quarterback center exchange is paramount. And then whatever hand your quarterback is, left or right, the backside tackle. So think about if I'm a left-handed guy, right? So when I drop back to pass and I turn myself 90 degrees to the line of scrimmage to throw, I'm facing to my left, right? And I'm throwing left-handed across my body to the right, right? To throw the football, right? So when I go back to throw, so what I'm getting at is that I'm turning my back to the right side of the offensive line. So if I'm left-handed, that right tackle is super important because that guy has to he has to keep the pass rusher from taking the inside bull rush, and then he also has to make sure he doesn't beat him around the edge. So he's kind of got to be the dancing bear, right? That's the same thing if the guy's a right-handed quarterback. So right-handed quarterback, when he drops back, he turns his back to the left side of the offensive line. That left tackle is hyper important because he's guarding his backside. If the quarterback inherently knows that backside tackle is good, it makes it, you'll see a lot more good timing throws on the front side of that play because the quarterback's protected and he knows it. And the way I can demonstrate this is when I just got done coaching this Cutter's football team, first of all, we had a left-handed quarterback and a right tackle go down early in the season, right? So I have been in this exact scenario where my right-handed quarterback has left tackle issues. We played we played two scrimmages and then our first regular season game trying to figure out the right tackle spot. Now, what we did to fight this was we put a tight end on the right side. Again, it would be the opposite for the Colts, right? So what you'd want to see is a tight end connected, so that you could try to get a double team on the pass rusher on the backside. And then what ends up happening when you put a tight end backside is they bring pressure front side. So what we made sure to do was our play action pass was a weak side inside zone, so you could push the running back to the weak side to handle, right, to offer like a double team on the outside pass rushers, right, and expect that your guards and centers are going to hold the line. And when we look at film, for the record, and this isn't me patting myself on the back, this is actually like our head coach Eric Anderson actually coached. We had a good offensive line, actually, good offensive line play late in the year. You'd see on pass downs we had a pocket set up. Now, the way we got to that was, like I said, we put a tight end pretty consistently to our left-handed quarterback's right. We double teamed the backside pass rusher. We put a running back to stuff the front side outside pass rush. The way we got beat is we didn't have any deception built into our offense naturally, which you'll see the Colts don't either. If you correctly diagnose whatever the Colts are doing, you're just going to get a negative play, and that's a problem. Um, and that's because what happened. I was thinking about how do I explain to people what the problem with the Colts is. The problem is that like there's a let's just I'm gonna name as many run plays as I can, just a run, right? So there's like a quarterback sneak. There's like a halfback dive, right? A diver and ISO. There's a power. There's a pitch. There's a sweep, right? Um, there's teams that run like, and then we're talking about like change your protection. So like a trap, an inside trap, or an inside zone, or um, a buck sweep, or a veer, or inside option, right? So there's only so many like run plays. Now most offenses have like these are the formations we use, these are the run plays we use, and then there's a play action built off that. There's a bootleg built off that, and then there's like your pass offense off of all your formations, right? And generally, the way they teach it is top down. They go, well, these are the sorts of route combinations that we'll use. These are the sorts of situational football we're trying to play. One of the things I've chuckled at lately is there was this article. I think it was Pro Football Focus, but there's no point in shitting on them if it's not. But basically, where they said um, watching football teams working diligently to get themselves in third and manageable situations. Like that's not every football coach's wet dream is to get in like a third and four or better. Um, so when you have an injured quarterback that's particularly mobile, and you have a considerable percentage of your offense predicated on getting our quarterback outside of the pocket, changing the launch pad, trying to get the ball out quickly, and he's just not able to do that. You just eliminated like 75% of your plays. Your offense is going to look really watered down. And as a result, when your offense looks really watered down, it tends to not have the flow, the motion, the sort of juice, right? To steal one of the Colts terms. And that's essentially what's happened is you know I've been saying for a while that in order for there to be like great, they say it takes 10,000 hours. It's it's like 10,000 hours together, right? It's not individually. It's like you can't be a great individual football player, come join a football team and all of a sudden you turn around. It's just like the my career um, cliche saying from NBA 2K20, where the guy says, no, like 2K19 actually, no, it's 2K20. So where the guy says, one man doesn't make a team. One man can make a crucial, or one person can make a crucial ingredient to a team, but one man doesn't make a team. Except at quarterback, and it's pretty apparent. You look at the teams where the quarterback, well, is protected, it generally tends to be successful. So there's that. And that's kind of what the Colts had hung their hat on. And they're not able to do that. And when you're not able to do that, if people are going to misplace their rage and anger, and if my podcast can be anything for the Colts, I would like to help you place your anger appropriately. Um, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the water here in Indy. But when you look at the injury report for this week, it's everybody and their brothers dinged up. You're playing against a team that you absolutely should beat. The problem is that when you traded for Carson Wentz, the thought process was if he plays 70% or more of plays, um, you have to upgrade this pick to a first round draft pick, right? If he plays less than 70%, it's a second round pick. You keep your first, right? And the Colts are probably better, I'm guessing, with that first round draft pick than they would be with it having to give up their first round pick, right? Just I'm guessing the guy that you pick in the first round is better than the guy you pick in the second. It's neither here nor there. But if I'm in charge, I guess I'm just a fan of like shutting people down. For example, like a Darius Leonard. It, one of the things you realize, you lean on these guys, you pay them all this money. I'm not at all mad at Darius Leonard. But the problem is because you were able to rely on him so much, you have hindered the development of his replacement. So now the Colts are, and that's the problem with football when you have like great players. They become sort of a cancer. And I hate saying it like that because it makes it seem like I'm going to dismiss guys like Quentin Nelson and Darius Leonard, and it's like, no. The problem is that when you have a lot invested in the individual, you don't have a lot invested in his backup. So the problem is, for example, the Colts are going to get, hopefully they get something in exchange for Marlon Mack, but I would not be surprised if the Colts end up releasing Marlon Mack. Because they ain't using him, and he wants to play and he wants out. So I don't know what's gonna happen there, but I think that what the tale of this season is gonna come down to, we bet on guys with Achilles injuries, and this is what happened, right? Either I'm guessing there's a possibility Eric Fisher's never healthy because this line isn't healthy, right? Quentin Nelson could very well, I know I'm repeating myself there, but Quentin Nelson could very well miss. That's going to require Fisher to tighten down, tighten the screws down a little bit. And again, they were talking about Carson Wentz's backside. So my thought process is, still call myself the layman here, actually getting out here, training as a quarterback, coaching quarterbacks, actually doing the thing that I've been writing about, right? Now that I'm kind of getting out there doing it, they've got to be thinking the same thing we and I. I'm sitting here telling you, ball's got to come out quick. You got to balance the run with the pass. It doesn't make sense to me. And here's the other thing. I heard I want to say it was Carson Wentz say earlier this week they came out with some protections that we hadn't seen. Um, I don't know how to say this. There's nothing new. Shakespeare told all of the stories, right? So that's one of the things that's always bothered me is I don't like bullshit excuses. So that's like another knock I feel like on Carson Wentz, that he's kind of the kind of guy that will give you, well, uh, you know, they came out in like a protection that was alien to me. By the way, follow me on Instagram or Twitter, at Likely Alien. Push subscribe below. Um, but yeah, it just makes me wonder, like, how many different protections could they possibly come out with, right? Because if you really think about it, what are the possibilities? One to six man front, right? One to four safety. They're either playing man or zone. You know what I mean? Like, what do you mean they came out with some alien protection? What alien protect? What protection hadn't you seen? What's new? That's kind of, and that shows me again that Carson Wentz was familiar with the system and not the installed offense, and that contributes to a sack rate. That contributes to his injuries. That contributes to it looking like when you're watching him, he's staring down the number one. Here's the thing. It's not that he's staring down the one, it's that's the what he knows, right? And he doesn't know where to go if that's not open, so he doesn't do that. And the only thing is that you can get better at that because the coaches can very visibly show you, the same sorts of things that you're seeing from my compatriots, where they're showing like, oh, had a clean pocket, should have just delivered this ball here, right? Those things will change because I can promise you there's no reason to keep playing them. If you're scoring 16, 17, 16 points a game, um, you might as well just see what Ellinger's got, right? Especially if your line's really banged up, you're not getting your playmakers back. In fact, you're losing guys. We still haven't got T.Y. Hilton back. We still, we could be out Taylor here. It looks like Marlon Mack wants out, although he practiced on Wednesday. So again, there's like these things that are just a million questions, like what is happening, right? Marlon Mack wants out, but he practices. Like, aren't you trying to get something for him? Why would you put him in a position where he could get injured? Am I the only one thinking that way? Or is the other organizations are like, what the hell's in the water in Indianapolis? Put the guy through a workout and we'll see if, put it on wax and send it around the league and see if he can get something out. I don't know. I don't know. I know that there were a lot of people that were questioning the Colts betting on guys coming back from Achilles injuries, and those people right now, Jonathan Taylor was like 13th in the league in carries, so he's getting used. He's an effective runner. It doesn't seem like it's like a long-term thing with him, and maybe he just, it has a little bit of a light load. But again, like I said, I'm concerned with what could be very well a fracturing locker room. Um, if you're a Colts player, know a Colts player, or a Colts staff member, and you'd like to chat off the record, I'll take a quote. I'll make sure the word gets out. If there's something going on. I've had this feeling since Frank Reich was hired, and this is no disrespect, because I don't I would hate to be in an interview and somebody pull up something and be like, look what you said about this dude you're trying to get a job from, right? Um, it's hard to think about what it takes to be great at the next level. And it's, as much as it's going off what the data says, it's kind of having this feel for the game. And I think that be, because of that, my path will end up being true. I want to coach at, like the middle school, high school level, and coach at the college level before I coach in the NFL. And I want that experience where I've got a young quarterback in the red zone and trying to build confidence, and having a game plan. Because when I watch it on Sunday, you know, I watched this Coach Voss, and uh, he was talking about how he sees guys trying to run other people's offenses, and they only have like 3 plays installed. And again, it made me think about Carson Wentz's struggles, and I think about how he's familiar with the system and he knows what the offense has in it, He just doesn't know the installed offense, doesn't have the timing down, and those are things that are rep oriented. In order to have the timing down on a rub that you want to run in the red zone, it's a timing thing, and that ultimately your mobile quarterback needs to actually be able to escape, create, and when he can't do that, he's just to sit and duck, and the Colts' schedule has been no slouch. So obviously, there's a lot of just questions swirling around an organization currently being filmed for what is it, a November Hard Knocks, the first ever mid-season. So it makes me think something's brewing, and I want to make sure I get this on wax. I'd actually said among my peers at Stampede Blue that I have a conspiracy. I always tell my buddy Chris Shepard about when I have an at NFL Scheme on Twitter. I always tell him when I've got a conspiracy that the Colts want Deshaun Watson, and the Texans had told the Colts, "You don't have enough." And the Colts said, "What do we got to bring to the table?" And they said, "A quarterback, not just picks." And the rumor is, of course, the Texans want like 6 picks and players, whatever. I wouldn't list 6 Colts that I would give up, so we're not even gonna do that exercise. I guess we could get our arm twisted. But my thought process is, once the Colts got Carson Wentz, the Texans were like, "We'll do a trade, Deshaun Watson. We want to wait until like after we play or something, until one of us has nothing to play for, um, so that the trade's meaningless for somebody." And so the thought process is Deshaun Watson for Carson Wentz and bodies. Who knows? But I want to make sure I call it on my podcast and actually say like, hey, I kind of half think the Colts are going to end up dealing Carson Wentz. The little interview with Jim Irsay where he says, you know, it's important, your availability is in question. It's important to have a quarterback that's vaccinated. And I don't know that Deshaun Watson is. And again, there's going to be people that say, "Oh, that Deshaun Watson trade's not possible," and it's like, no. The joke is that the Colts are like fumbling that, right? You have a quarterback. All you got to do is keep the guy upright long enough to get the ball away, and he's pretty accurate. First couple weeks he was completing, like I said, 65% of his passes. There are guys completing well over 70% of their passes, and they will all regress over time. As the more games you play, the more film you put down, the more predictable you become. And that's the onus is on offensive coordinators to keep their offense fresh so that teams don't see a lineup of formation and they know exactly what you're going to run out of it. That's why I was kind of saying it's different like at the pro level. You ought to be able to run every formation, every style of run play out of that. And then, like I said, there should be a drop back pass you run out of that set, and a 3-step and a 5-step and a 7-step drop, and then there's a play action and there's a bootleg and there's, you know what I mean, and there's screens built off that, um, all based off of this formation, and this run base is affected because this guy's dinged up. And at the next level, there's so much separation clearly, so it's not like I'm speaking Sputnik. It's pretty clear that the difference between like a starter level player at the NFL and a backup is stark, right? So it's pretty clear. The Colts are in trouble from a depth perspective, and that again is, it's like we're still paying for the past regime's errors. And there's a period before Chris Ballard and Frank Reich where there's a void where the Colts have no tenured players from like the last decade. All the Colts players have been in the league like 5 years or less. And there are specifics that fall outside that sort of category. And that's because prior to Chris Ballard, the Colts had been so bad that, the Colts, there were periods in the last couple of years where we're like, hey, 27 new players out of the 53 roster. Oh, the beginning of last year it was like, oh, it's just T.Y. Hilton and Anthony Costanzo from the prior regime. And then now it's just T.Y. Hilton and everybody else is new. And I get that happens to and there's very few NFL players that actually make it, but even more so for the Colts, we're so bad for about 4 or 5 years that it literally can kill a franchise and kill their potential, and that's what the Colts are trying to sort of undo. And I think that, and what's going to end up happening here, I think, is the Colts are going to end up trading away some pieces to recoup some value to rebuild. And I think people are going to be upset with what ends up happening here. But what could have very well happened is the Colts got their quarterback. This is who they're going to ride or die with. I believe that. And they're not going anywhere because this is a soft division and they're going to end up having to get rid of some bodies. And I hate to say it like that because it makes it feel like I'm like dehumanizing people. That's not what I'm trying to do. But I'm just saying, like, I don't know who it's going to be. It could be a Darius Leonard, and I'd argue Darius Leonard, Quentin Nelson, Carson Wentz, like all your heavy hitters are Kwity Paye even. All the Colts like good players. It's not the Colts backups. It's like you know I hate to say it like that because it feels like it's right. But when a guy like won't get vaccinated, and everybody else on the team's vaccinated, but your quarterback won't do it, and then your best defensive player won't do it. And then they talk publicly about it, and then it just fractures your team where guys are like, I don't trust that guy. And then you see them trying to force themselves to play because they got paid, right? And that's my big knock on Carson Wentz and Darius Leonard. Like, what are these guys doing? Do you not care anymore? Now that you got paid, it's just like, screw it. I'm going to get hurt. I don't want to play anyway. I'm going to go out there and play. I'm going to play my heart out. Like, it's so dumb. Get vaccinated and sit down, right? Yeah, I mean, that's probably good advice for everybody. That's probably where we should just end the podcast. It's in the Colts' best interest for Darius Leonard and Carson Wentz to just sit down and stop. You're it's it's like the beatings are going to continue and morale isn't going to improve. That's how it feels with the Colts. It's like it's going to keep getting worse until it's just better. And that I don't know if that because it's such a war of attrition. The NFL season is, and I have been thinking about that since I want to say it was like the Packers in 2014. They were super talented and they just got bit by the injury bug and it tore their season apart. And I think it was the Packers in like 2014. But I've kind of seen this before where I felt like the Colts were super talented. I felt like Carson Wentz was not a reach. I felt like the Colts gave up an appropriate amount to get that caliber of quarterback. I feel like he's capable of a lot more than he's shown. I feel like he's been put in a terrible situation where the problem in Philly was that after they won a Super Bowl, all their offensive line talent got old and retired. And by the time he left, there was like one guy left, and he's on the ass end of his career left on that offensive line. And then he goes to the Colts, and the Colts sported a talented offensive line last year and appeared to have addressed that. But by the time the season started, they weren't ready. It's readily apparent. They didn't address the tackle position well enough and do a deep enough dive because Davenport has been below acceptable. Um, and then Eric Fisher didn't come right back, right? Obviously, I was still shocked that he's out there, but again, I'm sort of shocked that anyone's out there. Like Eric Fisher, Quentin Nelson, Darius Leonard, Carson Wentz, I would just sit those guys until they're healthy and say shut them all down until they're all up. Because I think you have to have it sucks to say it because I don't think it's necessarily true, but for the Colts it appears to be true. If they're not all playing, they're not going to win. And there are guys you could sort of add to that little group of four. Like I said, Quentin Nelson, Eric Fisher, Carson Wentz, and obviously like T.Y. Taylor, like that. Take away the Colts' straight line speed are going to make the Colts very anemic on offense. This is, again, sort of a trap because I think heads roll if the Colts lose to the Dolphins. I have to think it comes. It might be necessary. I don't think it's going to be Frank Reich. I think Frank Reich is safe. I think Chris Ballard's safe. I think it's probably a coordinator because it's both sides of the ball. It's not just the offense, it's the defense as well. Uh, Again, I think it's because you've got guys at very important positions playing hurt. And I don't think that, I'm not saying that it's good or bad. I'm saying that it is having a negative impact and it's probably ill-advised. But as I stated, like I don't expect the right thing to be done here. I would argue that we would get caught up in what's right and wrong, right? Players have free will. If they show up and pass and they're ready to play, let them play. Would you say that if it was a concussion? Okay. So then if it's his ankles and he's a quarterback and he's mobile and I just told you that NFL data says 70% of throws are out of the pocket and you know the guy is going to have to move, why would you put anybody that is basically slower than like a Jacoby Brissette out there, right? And if you really think about Peyton Manning made a comment, and this is mostly a joke. Peyton Manning made a comment a couple weeks ago on ESPN2. They commentate Monday Night Football. Him and his brother, and they have a bunch of guests. And he said something to the effect of the last 40 he ran was in 1992 in high school, and his dad timed it, and he was running downhill with a tailwind, ran a 4.8840. There's probably a line of thinking out there that he probably would have never gotten an offer to play at Tennessee if they'd have found out he ran a 5.3. And I get it. That's hyperbole. Like Peyton Manning's one of the best quarterbacks of all time. No, if you really think about now and what you're seeing in the NFL, quarterbacks are more like ninjas and less like statues. In that you've got to be able to overcome the initial pass rush, escape the pocket. You've got to be a threat to run so that they leave someone open. And if the quarterback isn't a factor in the run game, your offense is going to be predictable and anemic. And it's just what you've seen from the Colts, and that comes from a lack of a familiarity. And it's the same thing I sort of preached last year, right? With the beginning of the season, the Colts always appear to start out slow, and again, that's because the Colts are always injured. It tells me that these guys are really working hard at getting better, which is needed. Um, and the problem is when you're working really hard to get better, you get hurt more often. And then the only hope is that when these guys get hurt, they come back and they've been able to maintain or continue to improve before they get back on the field, and that you're not taking out a worse product than the week prior. And I'm afraid that that's what the Colts are. Why this is a trap for the Colts. I think the Colts are in a bad spot here because you're on not only 0-3, and people all over Colts land are, except for Dan Dockett, who got fired today. We're fine with that over here. Um, Other than Dan Dockett, who nobody, okay. Um, I just think like there's people gonna call for people's jobs here. I will confess I've kind of wondered like are the strength and conditioning guys getting a pass? It just feels so weird. Is it the feel? Is it the turf type? Is it the context of the turf at practice? Is it the turf at the game? Something happening? Uh, I don't know what it is, but it feels like there's some tweak. other than getting healthy, right? Because people will chop you down what you're saying and say like, look, you keep saying injuries, but like every team has them. No, the fuck they don't. If you look at the Colts' first two games they played against teams with completely clean injury reports prior. I get it that there were injuries during, but again, we're not moving the goalposts. We're saying like game time, who's ready? Colts opponents, who's not ready? Colts, right? And that kind of leaves a bitter taste in my mouth. And again, I'll always wonder because of the Colts like relationship with players. No one ever comes out and speaks ill of the Colts. But with the way every season, every year, I feel like the Colts are dealing with like a severe injury bug. And again, like I said, it makes me think that they're like going too hard in practice or they're not, you know, one of the things that I'm always afraid of is like at the pro level is there not enough work and there's too many meetings and not enough maintaining your athleticism. Because strong wins, fast doesn't win is kind of the thought process at the top. Um, so I don't know. I feel like we're in a really frustrating spot where it's like you've not only have you lost, but you're continuing to lose because guys keep coming up limp, and then you're gonna get to game time and not have the bodies, and then it's like you're going out there with 12 starters and a bunch of backups. And again, my fear is that's a losing recipe because when you're missing starters, you're not as efficient. You end up falling short. You're in field goal range and could kick it, but Frank Reich only likes touchdowns. So then again, you're going to see spots where it should just take three, and we don't. And then you lose by three, and you're thinking, like, man, like, you just kick a field goal, like, take the 3 points. So we'll see if we can get that right. Because I feel like, and obviously, I feel like if we can clean up the pocket and take points when we can get points, games that we're losing now become winnable. And I know it kind of goes without saying, score points when you haven't been, and obviously the defense has got to be something other than a wet paper bag, because they're getting beat all over the place. And again, it's the scheme all the way around. And like I said, that's the thing that gets people fired, is that when your scheme is hot and it was working, you're unbeatable. But when you're dinged up and not everybody's that good, and the guys that are taking these guys reps because they're not ready aren't ready, the product that you see on the field's a train wreck. And you know it's gonna be one of those seasons where you feel like the first 5 weeks you were in the upside down. There's no other explanation for this. I saw someone comment today on an article I wrote that watch them end up, 11-6, and I wouldn't be surprised if they were 6-11 or 11-6. I wouldn't be surprised either way. It's the nature of the league. Sometimes you get the bear, sometimes the bear gets you. Sometimes you're the hammer, sometimes you're the nail. All those things. But yeah, right now the Colts are the nail. Right now the bear is eating the Colts, um, and it's just unfortunate that you get an opponent that is beatable, but every team that Colts play now has got to be gnashing their teeth. Let's beat them while they're down. You kind of gotta, you know, you gotta wonder what they're thinking when they trot out Carson Wentz behind a patchwork offensive line again. You gotta wonder what are we doing? But and again, like I said, I expect the cries for a seat change will be louder if the Colts are to lose to the Dolphins. Um, Again wouldn't anticipate Frank Reich. Um, I could absolutely see a coordinator getting axed. You know, special teams seems like it's got its act together, so it's about their job's safe, and I think Frank Reich's job's safe. But the way the offense and defense have played, um, it just makes me wonder like what on earth has us forcing these players to play injured? Why are we letting them make that decision and then we're losing? And then you realize, like, oh, because we dumped a bunch of assets into them and not enough into their replacements, into their backups. So we don't have suitable backups. Because, you know, a guy like Carson Wentz or a guy like Darius Leonard are so high profile and are paid so much money that they're going to get all the starter reps while they're there. So yeah, and it's I think both those guys are unvaccinated too. And it's not so much that's not so much the point, but it is sort of the point, right? Like a guy is paid millions and millions of dollars and doesn't know when to shut it down, doesn't know when to get a vaccine, doesn't 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 what do they do? Right? Um so yeah, I think that's probably like a spot to stop. Um, Make sure if you like my podcast that you let people know, that you share it, that you subscribe to my YouTube channel, you follow me. You know, it's right here. Likely Alien, Twitter and IG. I have cats and dogs. I post pictures of them. I try to be funny otherwise, and I talk football a lot. So yeah, my name is Jared Malott. This is The Coltist, an Indianapolis Colts slash football slash life podcast. This has been my fourth episode. Enjoy the games this week. I'll attach this podcast to a betting article I write for Stampede Blue. I still do a post game wrap over there. I'm just striking out on my own, doing my own podcast, and I thought maybe like a video podcast on YouTube people would enjoy. So you get to see my ugly mug talk to a camera for a while. Anyway, like I said, enjoy the games, everybody, and we'll see you next week.